As with all films, what do you do when it's really successful? Well, you do a sequel. And some are tailor-made for it. Some of them, the action movies and stuff like that, especially when you basically have a hero who's gonna have cases to deal with or adventures or whatnot. And it kind of writes itself, But for horror movies, it's like, especially even if one's really successful and all the scares that are in it and its angle, if you will, is displayed, and you go, oh yeah, that was something. To follow it up with, now let's do it again. It doesn't always work. Now, in the cases I mentioned, like action or adventure movies, so for a horror franchise, you have a recurring villain or monster character, and for the 80s horror films, that worked for quite a while. There was attempts to revive them, and it kind of got some excitement or whatnot, but never really returned to their former glory. And because even if it's a beloved character or even a villainous, nasty character, it's just, well, they're doing the same thing, and it wears out. So for Sinister, on the heels of Insidious, which is I think the Blumhouse people produced both, and so it was kind of this same crowd there working on them, and apparently there was a desire to cross them over, but Sinister 2 didn't do as well. And there's reasons for this, and it's primarily the one I'm mentioning. It's all the same thing. And it continues on with the deputy character from the previous film, which I forgot to mention in my review of Sinister, but who else is going to show up? And he was all interested in the case and a bit starstruck by the Ethan Hawke character and that sort of thing. But he got seriously involved and was even trying to warn the Ethan Hawke character, but he didn't listen to him. And there were other people. There was the occult professor who could have been, but it's interesting to note that he's mysteriously disappeared, and there's another character who was a friend of his or whatever introduced to explain or expand on this further with the deputy or ex-deputy. He left the department, and basically I guess he's a private investigator, but his real interest is trying to stop all of this thing that's happening with the mysterious Bughuul. And so he, of course, Bughuul shows up again, and all that. But then the only difference in this is that it gives you the viewpoint of the children that are, encountered by this creature, and I guess seduced by them. And so I guess by insinuation, it's saying, well, a similar thing must have happened with the girl, the daughter of the writer in the previous film, and of course all the other children who committed the murders. And so there's another series of murders, and you have this story played out with the deputy still investigating this, and his idea is that he feels that if he burns down the house where it begins, everyone is safe. And it seems to suggest that he's already done this and perhaps has saved some other people from this fate. But he finds this divorcee woman who's hiding from her husband, who's a well-to-do guy and has connections with the local police department and all that sort of thing. And but he was a violent man, in particular to their children, and in one kid in particular, the kid's rather introverted and frightened, and he was abused by his father. And so she's hiding the boys from him and looking for a way to get out of town and all this stuff. But she's staying at this place. And, well, guess what? It's right next door to a church where yet another one of these murders took place. And so this brings in the deputy. A little romance begins between him and this woman. And, the father shows up. And despite being outfoxed by the deputy initially, he counters and has the court orders, and the kid's got to come home. If the mother wants any involvement, then she needs to come back too. So of course she does. And the one of the boys is terrified of the man, literally pees his pants right there when the man shows up. So that's how bad it's been. And of course, you get a dose of that when they get back home with him, and it's orchestrating it completely. You do not like this guy. Meanwhile, the scared boy was the one encountering the visions and the Bugul's attempts at apparently drawing him in, but he's led into it by the ghosts of the previous children of the other murders. And they show him the films of their work, and he's all disgusted by it. And gee, it seems unlikely that he'd be the one that they would count as one of their members. And it was saying, well, you know, he's beaten down. You can understand him being angry at the world, and he'd be the type of guy they could turn. And he ends up committing the next series of murders and films it and all that. Well, he's got a brother who's a bit of a chip off the old block, and the brother is also aware of these phantoms and is a bit upset that he's not the one that they're interested in. And so he's tailor-made for this. Surprise! He was the actual target for Bugul, and they were just using his more frightened brother, who in the end, despite being seemingly cowardly, was strong enough to stand up to these demonic forces and not give in to what they wanted. Whereas his brother, well, he was just evil. Too much like Daddy, I guess. And he's the one who's going to commit the crime. So perhaps it's because it's all explained in this way. And like I said, through insinuation, you have to assume that something similar to this happened in the previous one. I don't know if this also insinuates that the daughter of the writer in the first film was interacting with her siblings and they were aware of this, but of course they're sworn to secrecy and are terrified to say anything by the monster and that sort of thing. And perhaps that's how it unfolded. But you gotta wonder, the little girl seemed just as innocent as could be. Why was she as nasty as this kid who ends up becoming the murderer, you know? I don't know. The rest of it, of course, is more elaborate ways people can be killed. And one of them is the church one is a bit absurd. These people are tied down. There's these rats are put on their stomachs, and then they're covered up, and then fire's lit to heat it up. So the rats are desperate to get away from the heat, so they burrow into the stomachs of these people. That's how they die. But I mean, the heating pot put on them the way they were moving and stuff could have fallen off, and the rat could have gotten out just that way and wouldn't have done much damage. It just wasn't all that well thought out, I don't think, as opposed to the others. There's others as the family gets electrocuted and all this stuff. It's all, of course, horrific. It is a horror film. The main killing, which is of this family, for them to be hanging out in the cornfield, apparently the initial shot of it was supposed to have been in the original film. So, it's kind of interesting. But they cut it out and used it for this one. And it almost works, but, well, deputy to the rescue. Only evil dad dies. No one cares because he was an asshole. And they manage, they escape. There's a confrontation in the house and stuff. But since the boy failed to complete his mission, well, he disintegrates away, I guess, into the netherverse. All the souls of the kids go to live with Bugul in his weird netherverse. If you can even consider that still them, they're probably just consumed souls and are avatars of himself. I don't know. You got to write it yourself to figure out. But, it doesn't really matter. And so that's the fate if you fail to get your victims and all that. And so he takes the woman and her surviving son. They go into his motel. He gets some stuff, and then, oh no, all the stuff he thought he got rid of the Bugul is still there, and then the Bugul shows up in his face, and it cuts to black. So the insinuation is that Bugul got him, and he's dead, or all that, but maybe not. I mean, who's to say the deputy survived? He just spooked him and taunting him to know that he's aware of him and he'll get him later or something. Because it seems to be trying to set up the rules about what he could do if you burn down the house. He loses his grasp on them or something like that. But whatever. They did introduce another character who could be someone they show up with in a third film. But the problem is there's no interest in it because it didn't do as well. And I don't see enough groundwork there to do it. Crossing it over with Insidious, which was a more successful franchise, well, why? What are the characters that are still around that you would recognize that, oh, this is the two films are now, oh, it's another shared universe. And then they cross over with Conjuring and but it's just all for the gimmick rather than any well planned or well thought out narrative or storyline that appears to be the logical progression of it. I think it's over. I think it's done. But someone really clever could come along and come up with a twist that, I didn't think of that, and it could work out. But I rather dubious of it. You can just slap Sinister 3 on it, and it's just the same thing. And they, play their little theme, whatever it is, the reversed sounds, drums rolls or whatever. It sounds like it came out of 9 Inch Nails. But then it's just more gimmick than story. But a lot of horror films fall to that. But all in all, it's not a terrible film. It's just not as good as the original one, and it explains everything, which to some extent there's a desire for it, but it's kind of like there needed to be a more subtle way, perhaps. But just showing the kids, explaining it all, I don't know. And again, it, like I said, it insinuates what the deal was with the previous one, but I don't know, it just didn't hit me the way the first one did. And because the only real scare, of course, is the horrific video footage and whatnot, and you already seen it, and you already know it's the evil Michael Jackson looking boogeyman coming. Oh yeah, that's a bad reference. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if they're still going to try to revive it, or if there's any life left in the Insidious franchise. I don't know. But unless they've got some interesting, clever twist, I see no reason to do so. So sometimes one and done is just going to have to be good enough. And the first one was really good. So there you go.